let's dive right into it and
Let's dive right in.
and have some fun, because I really enjoy chatting with you, and I really think sharding in particular, I think Near is in the forefront of sharding. So like I like to structure this, so let's just jump straight into like consensus, but let's just do like the highest level things, like it's proof of stake, it's just, let's just fly through these details. If you could describe this for the audience.
Yeah. I mean, so Near was designed, how do we build something that truly scales, that doesn't have kind of limitations of, I call it single computer. So yeah, sharded, proof of stake, kind of gas gets burned. We have storage staking, so kind of alternative to rent that I think is kind of better economically.
Storage staking, so you have to put up stake in order to store.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So you kind of have the proportionality of storage taken on the network is proportional to amount of tokens.
Straight away, I already pick up on a spicy subject here. What are your thoughts on state bloat? Because like state bloat's been like one of those things where I'm like, I'm just going to bite the bullet on that one. But I'm just curious on your view on that.
Yeah, so I mean, storage staking is effectively an approach to address that, right? Because you effectively, the amount of storage the network can have is proportional to the amount of tokens locked. And those tokens are not yielding, the rewards from staking. So you're effectively paying the validators for storing.
Right, but it always seems to come down to a dichotomy of like either we have state bloat, so that the chain keeps bloating in size in potentially very difficult to manage ways, admittedly. But the other solution is always just, let's just forget about it. Let's just forget that information. Like that's also just biting the bullet on it in a way. You know what I mean?
Well, so I think that's a wrong dichotomy. The right dichotomy is this paid for or not. If it's paid for, that's fine. So the point is that right now, mostly it's paid during the transaction when the data is stored. So you pay the validators of today, and then validators of tomorrow need to store it and not getting paid. So what we approach is it should continuously pay for it, right? So that's what people do with storage rent. The problem is when storage rent runs out and you have a smart contract that actually has valuable state, now what you do, right? And so storage staking effectively is addressing that, because it's as if the contract was staking or delegating in proof of stake and getting the reward and paying the reward to the validators, right?
Yeah, and what's key to this, it's you're paying it across time, not just as a single event as well. Yeah. Well, that's actually very interesting. That's the way. And also in terms of active state sharding, does Near have those same advantages as well?
Yeah. So the other side is like, because we have sharding, we can actually continue to grow it's not bloating a single computer, right? Like a single computer chains, it's actually can be sharded across.
Yeah. And in that way, it really scales the amount of active state you can have at any one time.
Correct.
As far as I understand. Yeah. And this is the reason, and just to bring it back to the more general, like this is why I'm so excited about Near, right? Because of the sharding technology. Like to me, it really is the best way to actually solve the classical blockchain dilemma as well. Because now we're in a situation where when you add capacity, you're not decreasing decentralization, you're actually increasing it. It kind of flips it on its script, right? Because you have a set amount of validators per shard. And then if you increase a shard, you'll have more validators. Well, you can only increase it when you have, but there's a dynamic there, right? And that to me is one of the reasons I'm so excited about Near and sharded systems in general. That's been really the core of it. Is that yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I mean that's one of the benefits, that as your network grows, more usage means you need more capacity. You increase the number of shards, which in turn needs more validators, and so these things are getting proportional to each other. Versus, you're maxing the number of validators, but then you don't actually like the 1,000th validator, 2,000th validator. It's not very clear what they add, but it's a cost to the network, right? And it's a cost to the so here you have kind of a proportionality to that, while every additional validator adds security because everybody's validating the kind of the overall chain. So maybe diving into the architecture, right?
Well, so I mean, just to finish off this thought, if you don't mind, I mean, that's why to me it was really the kind of the golden goose, if you will, of scaling tech, because it kind of solves that that dichotomy, right? And that's how we also get massive scalability, right? Like that's why these type of sharded systems like Near have by far the greatest capacity. And we'll get into that more. But yeah, let's dive more into the architecture. That'd be really interesting to learn about.
Yeah. So I mean, the kind of for us, the important part was like, how do we deliver the best user experience we can have given a sharded blockchain, right? And worth acknowledging that there is a kind of natural thing that sharded or any kind of parallelized blockchain cannot do, which is you cannot have atomic transactions, at least across the whole space, right? And so for us, it was like, okay, well, how do we deliver users and ideally developers as close experience to that so that they think this is a single chain, right? Similarly, how when you go to Netflix, you don't think about like that they're serving you, videos from different data centers. You're just using Netflix, right? And you're paying, subscription fee and don't think about the details of, you don't need to like, oh, I need to pay in this currency because the data center is in a different location, right? And, this data center is busy, so I cannot do anything right now. So kind of how do we remove all that challenges? And so that's why Near actually looks like a single blockchain, right? So we have a single blockchain that is being produced, and we actually split or parallelize the blocks themselves. And so you can think of, the whole account space has been split into shards. And then for each shard, right, there's a subset of kind of transactions that would touch the shard, and they are processed in parallel by different, we call them chunk producers and as well subsets of validators. So that's kind of the...
Is like another way to explain that. Like I'm just going to test my assumptions here a little bit. Like another way to explain that, like in other sharded systems, the shards are like different chains, right? Whereas in Near, you have the different shards producing part of the block, which then combine into a single chain. Is that a fair description?
Correct. Yeah. So they produce parts of the block, and then it actually gets the full block gets produced, which includes, like, instead of transactions, the block includes the header of the chunk. Mm-hmm. So we call them chunks. So effectively, the block actually contains, you can think of it like we have 9 shards right now, and it contains 9 hashes. It's a little bit more complicated.
That's a tiny block, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So our blocks are very small in result, okay. but again, like obviously its hash relates to a very specific, chunk. And so if like you explore, you actually see all the transactions because it effectively just unrolls that.
Yeah. In reality, obviously, that block is all of those chunks.
Union of all the transactions. Yeah, but because like the actual kind of any individual computer, if they don't want to track the whole chain at all times, can only see the subset of transactions.
You could actually literally verify that on a smartwatch. So I think that make some of the ETH folks jealous.
so that's actually I would say, like, we living the spirit of all of the things that Ethereum wanted to do, because we do have home staking. You can actually run it on like a 7-year-old laptop. Because the other part is because of sharding, and specifically how we implemented sharding, which we call status validation. This is an idea that when the block, in our case, the chunk gets produced, we augment it with all the information needed to verify the chunk without needing to know anything else about this, about the state of the blockchain. So it's kind of like self-verified, piece of information, and that is getting sent to the other validators who are validating it. And so because of this, the broad base of validators doesn't actually need to have large computer and kind of maintain a lot of state or RAM. It really just needs, to have a good, reasonable bandwidth, and then just validate these things and send approvals. And so we have, in our community, effectively different projects that specifically Metapool launched a program where you can run a $27 a month validator. So it's like a very cheap VPS. And then there's also like somebody ran it on like a 7-year-old laptop. So it's very much possible to do home staking kind of
Yeah.
on low grade
And
stuff. You can validate blockchain, on pretty
and it seems to me
lightweight
like
as well.
only really sharded systems have that capability, and to be both high throughput at the same time. Out of all the designs out there, because like the purely parallelized chains like Solana and Sui and say Aptos, they're all pretty great, but like there's a major trade-off there. That's why the validator requirements are so high for those chains. Whereas if Near were doing a similar amount of traffic, the node requirements would still be a lot lower than those chains. Well, higher than what they are today, but a lot lower still, right?
Correct. And I think we're doing, not at Solana, but I think we are doing usually more transactions than Sui, Aptos, etc. So yeah, so generally the idea that like the validator nodes can kind of stay at the same level, and you can just keep adding shards and kind of keep expanding. I mean, it's very much how Google was built, right? Google was like, hey, commodity hardware, let's just put more of it. And
the comparison to
keep adding.
Sui is quite apt, actually, because if there's more current usage on Near and you still have the lower node requirements than Sui, then that's case in point right there, isn't it? Yeah, that's very cool. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons I really
So
really love
our
sharding.
team is actually aiming. So they're already testing like 20 shards. I mean, 20 shards is running with 200K transactions per second, and so the goal is to get to 1 million of simple transactions.
Right,
obviously.
of course. Yeah, no. Yeah. I mean, it's just a fair way to measure TPS, in my opinion. You just do basic one-to-one transactions and see how much you can actually crunch per second. Boom. Now we can compare that across chains, because it kind of takes anything else into account. Oh, your transaction types are more efficient. Great. Your block time's faster. Great. Like it's all in there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, because you also probably want to benchmark like payments and trading, because it depends how, like, what is the complexity of those things. But yeah, in general, that's the good way to.
I thought swaps per second was a really interesting metric as well, but I haven't really seen it used much. Like you could use that alongside TPS to kind of see the difference between the efficiency for different types of actions. But yeah, I mean, in Near in particular, stateless validation is actually a great example of that. It's always been really at that forefront of research, and in particular, just to tie a little bit back to the history, as you were saying. I mean, I was a big Ethereum supporter. I was mining Ethereum from the first week of launch. Had a small mining operation at the time. I'm more of a proof of stake devotee nowadays. And actually, I really believed in that vision. And I was like part of the old school Bitcoin. I'm like an old school Bitcoiner from the class of 2013, So for me, I was fleeing Bitcoin because I always believed in the original promise. So I bought into the promise of Ethereum sharding. It's going to have 64 shards and I was going to really scale. And then it all pivoted. It all pivoted, much like BTC did, actually, to my disappointment. And it all pivoted away from that dream, and that was very disappointing. And that's what turned me into a critic of Ethereum today as well, because I just think, like, if you don't scale your system, like, it's pointless. Like, yes, you need to be decentralized, right? But if you don't scale decentralization, like, what's the point? Like, it's just an exercise in futility. You're just virtue signaling like you're freedom fighters, but you're not actually making a difference. It bugs me. Yeah. Build products,
Yeah, I think we all know. Everybody who reads your Twitter knows.
Yeah.
knows this.
We're here to ask you questions. I should avoid going on to Target 8s here, but I actually have some interesting ones for you, because in particular, so since we're talking about sharding and we talk about all the benefits of sharding, it would be worth maybe talking about some of the trade-offs, and that's maybe
for sure.
Yeah, and for me, the trade-off has always been speed, and I wanted to expand on that a little bit. Understand that currently the block time is like 0.6 seconds, right? And it will be increased to 0.2. There's plans in place to increase it to 0.2 seconds.
Well, decreased, yeah.
Sorry?
Decreased.
Sorry, I don't understand.
From 0.6 to 0.2.
Yes. That's right. So that's a very fast block time. But the concern for me is actually specifically with more complex DeFi. Because if you look, like, I was looking at some transactions earlier this week, and I was trying to understand how that works. So if you're interacting with, say, another protocol, then you need to, and say that protocol is interacting with another protocol, that's for each one of those steps, you actually have to wait for another block. So that that limitation in particular seems to be like the biggest limitation, because that seriously hampers the speed of more complex DeFi. And I actually even suspect that this might be the reason why Solana has, in terms of usage and revenue, has been more successful over the last year, let's say, or 2 years, let's say, because they're faster. And I'm kind of taking a very cold-hearted kind of free market approach here, because the thing is, Near has a lot more capacity, but if you don't hit that capacity, I don't think users actually care about theoretically higher capacity. So as long as Solana can keep up with demand and it's faster, it seems to me like it has an edge. So I'm really curious about your thoughts. Like, can this particular limitation be overcome?
Yeah, so that's indeed a very, as I said, kind of natural limitation, that as you're parallelizing the execution, parallelizing state, you just cannot have an atomic transactions that touch kind of this. We also, explicitly made a choice that we don't guarantee atomicity within the same shard, because we want to be able to reshard the network based on the demand. And kind of the idea is for near sharding to be fully dynamic. Right now, it requires kind of technical governance, but ideally dynamically reshards based on the load, right? If some smart contract is more used, that smart contract gets maybe more kind of space allocated, and then maybe regroup some other things. And so because of this, we don't want to guarantee that even if you're in the same shard, you will get atomic execution.
I may just, something that came out of the last discussion that I thought was particularly insightful is when you said, and this is a really interesting design decision, that you've slowed down the confirmation speed based on the speed of actually the cross-shard communication. I thought that was very interesting, because that actually brings like a consistency to the design, which in particular is something that's very important in regards to building things like CLOBs. So I thought that was a very interesting point, but sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like that it's not that we slow down, we just we are saying we don't guarantee, like it's going to be executing the same way. It doesn't matter if you're on the same shard or not right now, because tomorrow you may be not on the same shard, right? And so like we don't want to have this guarantee, which again, some other networks have done that, and in turn they effectively cannot reshard their network. And so if one of the contracts between two others who are all dependent on each other becomes really popular, they cannot reshard their network anymore, and so now they're stuck, right? And they're gonna collapse back into the same state that networks that ran out of capacity have collapsed before. So that's a very important choice, and I think, like, again, if for networks who haven't done it, they effectively kind of backed themselves in the corner of having the same issues. Now, indeed, it comes with a cost, and the cost is you cannot do when you're calling multiple contracts, like every step requires a block time, which indeed early this year we reduced from 1.2 seconds to 0.6 seconds, and by probably Q1, Q2 next year, we want to reduce it again to ideally 0.2 seconds, so 3x again. And that is challenging for kind of really complex DeFi. Now, the way we see the future is kind of through a different lens. I think we have been used to transactions in a way that Ethereum and Bitcoin have introduced this to us, where you kind of have this imperative, like, go and execute this set of actions on chain. And I think that's actually been a limitation from my perspective to adoption of crypto in general, because that's not how the world works. The world works actually like, hey, I want to achieve this result, right? And potentially there's like multiple things that can go wrong while achieving this result, but I want somebody else to figure out how to do that and give me the guarantees, or ensure the if things go wrong, etc. And so that's what we call intents. So intents is a new type of transaction where you describe the outcome, not the exact steps. And then somebody else may go and execute how it's done. Intents can atomically effectively guarantee you even things like, I want to get a pizza, or I want, 100 tons of steel to be arriving to a warehouse. and the match that you get is actually, will be like, hey, it will arrive by this time. Here's insurance if something goes wrong. Here is, trade financing to do the loan while it's in motion. And by the way, here's, rent for the warehouse, right? So you can actually have a lot more complex, like set of actions that will be executed on the back end, packaged into this new type of transaction. So to bring it back to kind of more traditional stuff, let's say you want, you want a loan, you want to trade using it, across multiple pools, and then you want to receive, something, right? Like rebalance your position based on that. Well, the reality is you just want the outcome. You want the rebalanced position. And that's why doing the flash loan, doing trades, and then putting money back in. And so the idea here, you would describe this intent, and then somebody else can go and execute that, or they can front it, right? They'll give you the money, and then they use yours to actually execute the rebalancing. So we already have this near intents protocol. It's not just for near blockchain. It actually runs with Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum, Tron, Ton, Stellar, etc. Like it actually works across all chains because it's actually not just, it's like chain abstracted by nature. It's even crypto abstracted, right? You can actually do real world stuff as this.
It's something like intense, like because CLOBs, central limit order books, such as Hype in particular, have been very big recently. And I actually do think this is a very important use case. So something that I've been looking into specifically could you potentially get that type of speed and reliability if you used intents to achieve a type of CLOB infrastructure? Or
I mean, you can see that? The intent can be the limit order as well. I mean, limit orders actually, usually people call intents limit orders because that's actually the standard type of intent. I'm actually describing richer types of intents, but yeah, you can totally have a club type intent. I mean, we also talked before that the other approach is you can have, sharded smart contract, right, on near that. So it really depends how you want to engineer your system. But I think intents is just like such a more generic approach to do this, and it allows to really bypass, like, again, so we, for example, have like, I want to buy Zcash for Bitcoin. There's literally nobody who is providing liquidity for that kind of pair. But this is my intent. My intent is I have Bitcoin, I want Zcash. The idea here is like, and for example, you have a limit order. I want this much Zcash for this much Bitcoin. Well, this limit order can actually, somebody can take this on and say, hey, I'm actually going to split it into two, Bitcoin to USDT, USDT to Zcash, or Bitcoin to near to Zcash, and execute those limit orders inside the
where would the
back into the network.
Where would the order book be in that case?
So we have this effectively intent based. We call it solver bus, but effectively it's you can have it kind of off chain, right? And you have off chain matching. You can have some of this on chain as well. And then you can shard that as well.
Well, that was the exciting thing about Hype, right? Like they are doing this on chain. That's the thing that's so exciting about it. That's why it's generating so much revenue, I think, as well, and really competing with centralized services, which I think is something ultimately we want to be able to do, I think, as blockchains too. The thing about intents is interesting. It opens up a lot of possibilities. AI has been a big driver for you, as far as I understand, as well. And I think we have a similar view on AI. I think, if I just share, I think there's a lot of projects right now that are trying to meld AI and blockchain, and I find a lot of these a bit nonsensical, like with data or like with actually training the models themselves. It doesn't really make sense to me, as far as I've looked into it, at least. But what is interesting, I think you share my perspective as AI is more as users of blockchains, and that is very powerful and intense, like really enabling that as well. I thought that was particularly interesting. The critique I would have of that, though, and this is something we discussed last time, but I thought it was an interesting point to bring back up, is that actually if you have an AI, right, that has like a smart wallet and is empowered to deploy things for you, like, wouldn't it make more sense for that AI? Say you want to access a market on Solana, for example. Say you want to go into Radium on Solana. Wouldn't it make more sense for that AI just to deploy a wallet directly on Solana instead of deploying it through Near and then Solana? Because then Near takes an extra fee there, right? And so that affects speed and cost. And you'd think an AI would just do things unbiasedly and as efficiently as possible. You would hope. So, like, how do you see that dynamic playing out, and what are the trade-offs there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a number of different aspects to this, and it will depend. I think for some things it will make sense to go directly for AI. I agree. And then there's a number of cases where, as you're executing, so kind of there's a whole host of technologies, right, that we've built to kind of enable this, right? So one of them is called chain signatures, which turns Near accounts into effectively multi-chain account. So your Near account can effectively sign transactions across other chains, Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum, etc. Effectively anything cryptographic. And that has a lot of benefits because you leveraging the whole Near account model, which, it's its own whole topic because we can, rotate keys. You can turn accounts into contracts. Effectively, every account is a contract already, and by definition can do a lot of things. You can have different access models. You can effectively restrict. And so when we're talking about AI, if it's fully autonomous AI, it needs the kind of key management, verification, etc., that we provide, right? If it's your AI, yes, it potentially can have keys, but you probably want to actually add a bunch of guardrails on how it will execute, etc. So again, this is like, if you execute through our infrastructure, you'll get all these guardrails as well as it will then go execute actions on other chains.
I see, because there'd be security benefits by using Near because of the way it's structured with multi-party computation and
multi-party computation. Yeah, like the account itself can verify that you're not doing anything. And so we have this example. We call them shade agents. And so shade agent is combining, and we haven't talked we have this whole decentralized confidential machine learning infrastructure. So this is using secure enclaves for specifically AI inference, memory, running agents, etc. And so there,
why would you need an AI to utilize a secure enclave?
So, well, if you don't have secure enclave right now, right, you go to, any operator for that matter, and that operator sees every single interaction you're having with AI. That operator can actually give you the result that they want you to see, not what model said. So they can be like, if Justin bonds, then
right.
buy Ethereum.
Interesting. So there's some really interesting privacy advantages then too.
Exactly. And that's why we call it, decentralized confidential machine learning. And then decentralization comes, it's verifiability, right? So this model run, it run on this data. But importantly, it's also unstoppability. If you want to run agents that actually unstoppable, similar how the smart contracts are, you need a decentralized compute, right? And so that's why we're combining decentralization and confidentiality. Now, all the money handling and key management, right, is still on chain. Like you don't want to trust TEs with all your money. But trusting with intelligence, inference, etc., that makes sense.
And that's where it touches Near, basically, is because
and that's where exactly. And so that's kind of like we have the blockchain for like root of trust, right, verification, etc., that scales that you can use, with millions of agents or trillions of agents. You have the MPC that allows to actually this on-chain stuff to go everywhere, and then you have TE, like the DCML infrastructure for the intelligence, right, for the brains. And so you're kind of combining all this into one stack. Now you have both autonomous agents, or you're delegated some agent to run something. And again, you know that this code, like this thing is running. It's not trying to cheat you.
Yeah. So it's wow. Actually, so I'm thinking about this some more. It seems like because actually running the AI on the L1 itself to me is nonsensical, as I mentioned. But running it on the side, and obviously, like the trust trade-offs for this type of AI would not be the same as the L1, right? Correct. It's a different set of trust trade-offs, but arguably good enough for this purpose, right? So then you could host the AI potentially in a trustless and decentralized way, which would then be a truly autonomous Hmm. Well, maybe it depends on who controls some keys and upgrade paths or whatever, but potentially a truly autonomous agent.
Yeah, and again,
Yeah.
the keys and upgradability can be verified on the smart contract, because you effectively, the passive verification goes through the exact code hash that TE was running. So I mean, beyond the NVIDIA and Intel, mass kind of the chip printing. So unless
Mm.
they start printing fake chips, uh, that's kind of the core assumption. And then
Wow.
importantly, like that gives you like all of the kind of additional services and scalability. Then Intense becomes a really useful tool as well to verify that the AI is doing the correct job, right? Because it's very easier to verify the intent than verify the complex execution across 20 chains. And so you can, on smart contract, then verify the intents that AI kind of produced to execute, and then, go and execute it across all those different chains with the accounts and controls there. So it's really about like all of those pieces kind of working in unison and
Mm.
providing this new experience. And like from a high level vision, I think, as you said, it's going to be like the change to how we interface computing, how we interface crypto, how we interface kind of traditional markets, but also just regular applications in the world. And so that's why privacy is important, because you want it to have as much context about you, but you also need, we're not going to trust even perfect AI, perfect privacy AI. We still need to verify that it doesn't do anything kind of outside of our allowed control.
So I think that very much answers my critique of like, why would people pay that extra amount to the near blockchain? And it's for privacy and security and for verifiability and the autonomy and independence of the AI. I mean, the AI is, in a manner of speaking, is tied into near, right? In terms of where it lives, let's say. So I think that's fascinating, really. I love thinking about these far out scenarios of what that will become. But I do agree with you. Like I think we should look at AIs as the future super users of crypto, and that they'll act on our behalf and abstract a lot of the complexity. And I'm all for that. And actually, as a long-term value investor based on fundamentals, I'm actually looking forward to how that might help create a more
To be,
rational market as well. Yes.
I thought you were looking forward to be automated by AI.
No, no, no. No. I want the AI to validate my point of view. That's actually the more at the cusp of all of this. Yeah, but it is a fascinating, exciting future. I mean, that's one of the reasons I really love cryptocurrency as well, is that we're really at the cusp of these evolutions and this kind of political and economic experimentation. Let's talk about economics. Actually, that might be a good segue, unless you wanted to cover the AI bit a bit more.
No, I mean, obviously there's like a lot to go on.
Yeah.
I mean, just to give you an example of something we have running right now, we had launched a kind of autonomous agent. We gave it $10,000, and what it does, it goes and reads Twitter, determines a sentiment about different assets, and trades them using intents. Right. So this is like very much example, of AI that uses intents because it's the easiest way to execute. It doesn't need to go and figure out which market to buy. Like if it wants to trade its Zcash for Solana or its
Mm.
Bitcoin for Ethereum, like it doesn't need to go and like ask anyone's permission, figure out, etc. Just uses intent, gets the quotes, executes it. And so it's actually, I haven't looked recently, but it made like 40% in 2 months. So it went like up to 14K doing that.
Well,
So
that's more than my fund made in that time.
well, maybe it's all about sentiment on Twitter, right?
There's plenty of investors out there that appreciate a good opinionated manager. I won't be made redundant for at least a while, at least.
Yeah, but kind of shows you the whole stack, right? It like uses our smart contracts is where the kind of security verification, chain signatures to hold assets, intends to execute, kind of the secure enclaves, decentralized confidential compute to really run the brains and analysis.
It's a fascinating vision. It really is. And yeah, and I think that's what it takes as well to create a blockchain. I think if you're a founder like you are of an L1, I think if you're not going into it with really the vision of like, I can improve on this, I can make it better, I would question their motives. I think because it's financialized. It's like it's people lives and hopes and dreams are at stake. You really have to believe in it, or you either won't be able to sleep at night, or you're just not a good person. You know what I mean? So we see plenty of that in crypto, and Near has been one of those projects that's always been very legitimately innovating in that regard, and that's always been a beautiful thing to see. I'm a big fan of the economic model as well. I've said for quite a long time that actually the ideal economic model is tail inflation plus fee burn. I was recently involved in the vote and the discussion around that to actually lower inflation from, I believe it was 5% to 2.5, right? Yeah, and I think I would prefer to see it below 2% myself. I believe how much of the fee is burnt actually? I recall we talked about that last time, but
Yeah, so the current structure, actually, the 70% is burned and the 30% allocated to the developers of the Touch smart contracts.
oh, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm actually not a fan of that design, interestingly enough. I'm curious about your thoughts. I know I kind of have the personality when I find disagreement, that's the thing I want to home in on and
Yeah,
learn
yeah,
from,
no. I think like when we originally
Yeah,
designed this, which is now, it was 2019, right?
yeah.
I think the assumptions were very different. I would say that I would be open that we should change it to 100% burn of that. And then, so maybe it's a mechanism, right? You mentioned tail inflation. Yeah. So we have effectively a percentage inflation that is being, first of all, part of it goes to the treasury for like future development and effectively a treasury for the governance going forward. And then the rest is being split between the kind of validators based on their activity, they're online and, not doing anything malicious.
Treasury is a great addition, by the way. I'm a big fan of that type of structure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the idea is like, all the transaction fees are burnt and then, validators receive inflation. So as more gets burned, the effective inflation gets reduced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you
That's
can
why
go
I'm
fully
which why I'm such a fan of
deflationary.
this model, because it
Yeah.
ends up being exactly as you say.
Yeah, it can go fully deflationary as more transaction. And it's like it's an interesting, again, where I think for us it's very interesting is it very naturally works as like the network keeps expanding because you're burning more fees, and so you actually kind of justifiably increase number of validators. Because one of the challenges is like, you can have a lot of validators, but then you effectively need to subsidize them, right? Because they're not getting much reward. So you need like to justify that number of validators. And so for us, it comes from the, processing more transaction fees. Now, indeed, like the 5% that we picked again back in 2019, that was a kind of design choice at the time, which, came from some assumptions and calculations, which I don't think are true anymore. And that's why I think I was also supporting the kind of community's proposal to reduce it, and I agree that 2% probably is better. Like, I think more analysis is needed as network grows. That can also continue reducing, and so I think also one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that actually high percentage of the staking rewards actually reduces the DeFi. So if we talk about some of the challenges with, kind of near adoption, especially in DeFi side, the other side was like, because of such a relatively high reward rate, that means that you're less likely to go and kind of risk your capital in other protocols, right?
That actually nails the nail on the head there, because the inverse of that is also true, right? Because if the rewards for staking are too low, then more of the stake is attracted to go the DeFi, and you could potentially have security problems there as well. Like, that's actually my concern with actually having none of the fees go to validators, that it could be rendered a bit uncompetitive, say, compared to, say, lending and borrowing protocols, where people would maybe rather stake there. And I understand it is a self-balancing system though, right? Because
I think it's self-balancing because, again, the rate of effectively reward for validator, I mean, during the time is like it's a fixed amount, right? And so if validators if some stake moves to some other opportunities, you effectively increase the reward for those who stay, right? And so, and you can, there's like an analysis on. We actually had this analysis done around like what is the security thresholds are at different like amount of TVL in the DeFi versus in staking, and how it
Fair enough.
balances. Yeah.
But I mean, there's also a bit of a vision here. Like, I do think eventually the revenue that these blockchains are going to generate are going to far outstrip, just what they're getting from inflation. So personally, I do like the idea of still paying the validators because, I like decentralization and security. I know we don't want to overpay for those things, but if we have a potential future where there's more revenue there, let's make our blockchains even stronger, right? And like utilize at least some of that. That's just my view on it. I wasn't a fan of the part of the rewards going to developers either, because I just think like they could just program that into their own smart contract if they want, and like that's the kind of thing that the free market should just decide on, and developers can kind of just program that out if they wanted to too, right? So.
Yeah, they can give it back effectively.
Yeah.
So the reason why we did this was actually back in 2018, 2019, there was a lot of like shared smart contracts on Ethereum, which were not paid at all. And so effectively they were not capturing any revenue, even though somebody put a lot of work building them.
Yeah.
And so that was really the reason why we kind of built that, because and I think like we had this feature launched this year, which called global contracts. So now you as a developer can deploy a contract, and then everybody else can use it and map to that specific contract. Like, in every network, you usually deploy a contract, right? Here you have somebody deploy the contract and everybody can link to it. So first of all, it makes it super cheap. Now, linking to a contract, right, is just updating one record. You don't need to re-upload anything, etc. And this means that you can have like a multi-sig contract, for example, that is used by millions of users, right? Every user uses it on its own thing, but then the developer of that multi-sig contract is not getting it.
But it seems
so that was kind of the mechanism.
No, I understand the motivation, and it's certainly a good motivation. It's coming from a good place. But at the same time, if you look at how the free market would function, the market would just gravitate towards the app that doesn't take that fee and is therefore more economically efficient. That's probably the reason why the apps that were being used so much is because they didn't charge that fee. And I think a decreased amount of rent seeking on users is not all. Rent seeking is maybe a bit harsh, but that's not all a bad thing either. It's kind of moot because you can just program around it, right? So it's not really that. It doesn't seem to me that impactful on the final equation in terms of economics, but it's still a little pet peeve of mine. Maybe you could call it that.
I think this goes to like governance and public goods funding, right?
Yes.
Because like if you have such contracts, maybe the better way is actually using the treasury, which is kind of the same mechanism. You're effectively just taxing everyone, right? But then you can be more intelligent on how you're distributing it.
And this is the perfect segue to talk about governance, obviously. And I loved what you said last time. I'm going to keep annoying the audience by referencing a talk no one's going to hear, but it's what you said last time about how politics and economics are very much like intertwined with each other, and I think that's what makes it such a good segue as well to talk about that, because I'm a big advocate of on-chain governance, stakeholder governance, and I'm so happy that actually Near has gone in that direction, because I remember we had a conversation, I think it was 2022, quite a while ago now, and I was a bit concerned because you're playing around ideas with reputation and all these things. I'm like, no, don't do that. One coin, one vote, period.
Yeah, I think like just like high level, right? I think explicit governance is always better than implicit governance. And I think what we see right now kind of across, a lot of ecosystems, like Bitcoin being the main one, right? There's implicit governance. And it means that nobody knows how decisions are made, right? Even the people who are supposed to make decisions don't actually like, are we making decisions or do we need to get everybody on board, right? And so because of this, you get more politics, you get more...
It tends to devolve into like dictatorial systems as well. Like when you create voids of power like that, like that's how I would view...
It's dictatorial, but even like you can have a case where even the whoever is considered a dictator doesn't acknowledge they're a dictator, right? They
Right.
just kind of like,
But
yeah,
that happens
well,
with dictatorships too, right? And then like
yeah,
dictators can't
it's
also get
true,
away with
but
everything as well, Like it's
I mean, normally in like traditional governance, if you're like a dictator, you're a dictator, right? You usually have like a bunch of medals on your.
it's the classical type of
And
dictator,
here in
right?
blockchain, we have people who are like trying to avoid power and becoming the
Well,
locus of
what
power.
I think happens in reality is that if you create a system that is, in my view, so flawed from a governance perspective, you're just saying, oh, this is GitHub. The GitHub determines the governance, or you have a lead maintainer. You're basically governing a blockchain like a software project, which is a natural thing for, say, an engineer or a software architect or a computer scientist to kind of reflect on it that way. But I think it's a completely inadequate way to actually govern a blockchain because it, in my view at least, and in my experience, it ends up devolving into usually it becomes captured. It gets captured by some other party that like can
Well,
effectively exert control.
I think, as we
Yeah.
mentioned, right, because the governance of blockchain is so much tied to economics, the GitHub, maintenance, although important, is a secondary to this economic question. And so I think, and like GitHub cannot decide on
I
economics
think,
because the economics,
yeah.
they live on chain.
So I
And
think
so,
I agree with you in principle. Like I think that's what should happen, but I don't actually think that is what has happened to BTC and Ethereum, and that's why I very much consider those to be failures in that regard. Also from like a government
but as I
experimental
say,
point
like,
of view.
yeah,
Yeah.
but there's no way, like, as a Bitcoin holder, there's no way for me to express that opinion and for people to understand that, like, if Sailor right now wants to go and say, hey, we should do something, given he has like such a large, control of Bitcoin, like he should be able to do that, right? So that's what I mean is like, this is going back to like, yes, we should have
Yeah.
economically weighted
Yeah. And we
governance
should tie it back into
because
economics. Yeah.
because we govern the
Yeah.
economics, right? And
Exactly.
that's what I mean. That lives
That's
on
the way
chain,
to
not on
solve it.
GitHub.
That's how we solve it.
Yeah,
That's exactly
yeah.
the point. And that's what Bitcoin lacked. I thought a long time ago that I thought maybe miners could act like as that type of decision making force. But the conclusion I reached is actually that in the end, the miners will actually prioritize short to midterm timescales over long-term timescales because they don't want to rock the boat. I think that in particular is a major problem in terms of the incentive of miners in the context of a governance system, because that's in a proof of work system, that's where the economic incentive lies, right? They're the only ones with skin in the game. The great advantage is that with proof of stake, we can actually lock people in for much longer time frames. And that is why that, for me, particularly solves the kind of long-term decision-making problem in these governance systems. And in particular, why I love that Near has a design where you have the option to stake for a much longer period, giving you more weight in the governance process. Yeah, I've specifically called that out as being like a key mechanism. It seems like a detail that most people are not going to like agonize over, but for me, it could actually mean the difference between success and failure at some point in the future. I love that you guys have implemented that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think the importance of I've talked to people who are like, oh, because we were locked, we didn't sell, right? But in turn, we were kind of more invested, right, in success. And I think especially given kind of how cyclical blockchain has been, like crypto space has been. I mean, my target was like have a way to lock for 4 years, so like you can effectively stop thinking about the cycle from a perspective of the, am I going to exit or not, and instead think of like how to make it successful for next cycle. And so I think
Exactly.
that is one important moment, and then the other one, like just kind of realization that although that like there's a failure even with the stakeholder governance, right? We've seen there's still failures in like humanity of the system, and so one of the things we're investing in is actually using the AI we just described actually to become representatives as well, right? So I think the challenge is like I'm even like I'm in the network. Like I cannot spend 100% of my time on the governance, actually like participating in every conversation and doing this. And as you know, people like who have other jobs who may be more part-time involved in Near, right? And so because of this, you kind of have this problem that like the governance becomes the kind of secondary to everything, and like people don't actually inform and make decisions kind of willy-nilly. And so I think that is where AI comes in, where you can have, we kind of have like a 3-step plan. So first step starts with your AI copilot, right? So you come into the governance, you should be able to get like summary, you should be able to ask questions. It should help you analyze the repercussions of this decision. And I think that's, so there's an important aspect that, again, I think in DAOs haven't been really figured out, is kind of, you shouldn't be voting on the specific proposal based on how good this proposal or bad this proposal is. You should vote on it based on, is this the best use of money right now compared to anything else we can be doing? Like, and so I think this is where AI can actually help analyze this, where like as person right now, like the governance is like a no context analysis, right? You arrive to a proposal, like, is this a good proposal? I don't know, like the KPIs they put are reasonable. Okay, let's vote yes, right? Versus like, yes, maybe it's a good proposal, but it's a bad use of money right now. We should be doing something else. This is the same money, right? Because like, and so I think like there's like few small things that really need to be fixed around like effectively budgeting, like how much, you spend budget, and then what this budget is allocated per time. And so AI is kind of a helpful tool there. But the second thing is like, again, we have principal agent problem, right? We decide that, Justin should delegate all my stake to Justin for him to go and vote, because I think he's a great guy. But Justin has his own opinions and his own motivations, and so he's like, oh, this other project is really great. I'll give all the whatever treasury to it.
Yeah.
So it's important to have effectively AI delegates, like AI senators, who we can actually who don't have any ulterior motives, right? You know what the prompt they run, the bylaws.
But what I suspect will happen, though, eventually, if you kind of play this out, you're gonna end up with left-wing and right-wing AI delegates, and that's how people end up expressing themselves again, right? That's just human nature.
Well, that's fine, but the problem is right now, if you elect someone, elect a senator, you have no idea what's going on in their head. They may be like completely pretending and lying about everything, right?
That happens way too often.
So that's kind of like, we're fixing that problem. It's great to have like a bunch of, actually, I would be happy if there's like 50 versions of AI delegates, which are all representing different like, aspects of the opinions. And then people can self-select which AI delegate they want to delegate to, and then maybe even give more feedback and like tune the opinion there.
That's fascinating. But I do think the harsh truth behind blockchain governance, like I'm a big fan, a big advocate of on-chain governance. I think we need to implement stakeholder governance, etc. We need to implement treasuries, which can spin on proposals, which can actually give a blockchain some competitive edge as well. I'm also not under the delusion that at the current scale that most of these blockchains are at, it's not really functioning. Decentralized governance doesn't actually function the way it should function at this scale. It's actually highly dysfunctional in the sense that I'm pretty sure of like every major blockchain today, if you get, say, 10 key people together in a room and you all agree on a particular outcome, and then you can all agree on a particular outcome, let's say, that would have to be another given. And then like, if you then come out with that publicly, that's going to be the path the blockchain takes, right? Like, is that really a decentralized decision-making process? No, it's a little bit more of a decentralized circus if we're not honest about it, right? Like, we, as the founder, you have immense influence over the project, and that's not a bad thing. Like when a project is young, that's how you want it to be. But there's this weird challenge, I think, for any blockchain where if you implement decentralized governance too late, as I mentioned before, you run the risk of capture, you run the risk of some terrible decisions being made and that actually ruining the blockchain as well. And worst of all, you can't actually implement it. Once it's too late because implementing decentralized governance implies the surrender of power of the people that are in charge now. And just from a historical perspective, that's the exception to the rule, not the rule. from that humanities background that I'm pulling from, that just doesn't seem like a good idea. But then if you implement it too early, you end up with something slow and dysfunctional. So it's a real dilemma, honestly, in design. I'm often okay. It just depends, I think, where you are in that process. I think as you mature, I think if you very early on make a commitment to on-chain governance, I think that goes a long way, because that's something we can then look back on. Something that was infuriating about the BTC debates was it's like people are like arguing over things, but we can't even agree on the process of decision making, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Implicit governance effectively ends up, in this where everybody just like, we don't even know how to make decisions, right?
Yeah. Well, someone made the decision at the end of the day, and that to me was a very centralized process, and that's anti-ethical. That goes against the ethos to me for cryptocurrency. If you have a decentralized cryptocurrency, if the decisions are made in a centralized way, like what the hell are we doing here? Like that makes no sense, right? And that's why I love Near too.
I would also mention that, interestingly, 10 people agreeing on something and going and like broadcasting that wouldn't actually help as much with AI delegates, because assuming the AI delegates working correctly, and
Yeah.
that's still R&D.
And that those 10 delegates don't perfectly match onto those 10 people. But
yeah, well, again, because we can actually guarantee a delegate runs this model with this context, with this prompt. So that again, this infrastructure we're building actually gives us the ability to use it in the governance.
That is so exciting.
And so I think like there is some interesting aspects of that as well, where even if people are like, even if the community actually is swayable by the, kind of by the prominent figures in the community, the AI maybe not, and may actually still be like cold-bloodedly analyzing like, hey, this is still a dumb idea.
And consistent in its position.
Exactly. It's consistent in its position, and like you need the community to actually fully like push those AI delegates to the opinion and like be active in doing that. So I think like obviously the problem is like the governance itself is like, what are we talking about? Like, are we governing, parameters of the network? Indeed, this is where you really need to just think through like what is the long-term beneficial to the network, right? And this is where I think, some of the AI stuff already can be very useful, and actually people are pretty fallible in that, because like people have, a harder time doing like a structured analysis of what is going to be good in long term. There's things like, allocating capital, etc. And maybe that's not good because it's actually very easily swayable, and you do want to do for now.
This is one of the reasons I'm not concerned about participation rates, both in blockchains and democracies, actually, because I'm kind of like, if you're so apathetic that you don't want to bother voting, I'd prefer if you don't vote, actually. I actually much rather have specialists making these decisions. So I'm actually okay with that kind of trade-off, So I'm not too concerned about that particular side of things, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of things, because sometimes you're not participating because you just don't understand.
Right. You also don't want participants to be completely overwhelmed where they don't even want to start to make.
Exactly. If it's too many proposals, they're too low level, etc. That's why I think, like, again, having AI copilot that can be like your, sidekick.
That's a very fair point. And actually, I can share maybe Cyber Capital's my firm's perspective on this. When we participate in governance, it's very much like, well, what's going to be the cost to us, like in terms of time and manpower to actually participate. So if you lower that cost, then we're actually more likely to directly participate. So I think that's spot on, actually, and I can speak.
Or maybe you will have your Cyber Capital AI that participates in all the governances, and you just like prompting it with your kind of position and opinion and update it from time to time, but effectively it can go and do that on your behalf.
We're actually deploying hundreds of AI agents now. I'm actually not involved with that project myself personally, but it is very exciting. So maybe one day they'll be running on Near as well. Yeah.
Soon TM.
Yeah, soon. That's a wonderful thing. And I love how the governance is a really check for me. So yeah, economics, governance, consensus, scaling. What else have we not covered yet? Man, we flew through these. That was powerful. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it'd be interesting to maybe finish on, or maybe we could expand on like your motivation, all of this. It's always interesting understanding, the people. What actually struck me in this conversation as well is actually that like I got into blockchain early on because I could see how blockchain benefits governance, right? And you got in, as far as I understand as well from your story, that you got into blockchain because you could see how it could benefit AI. And now we're at this wonderful place where AI and governance are kind of coming together through blockchain, and it's all just benefiting each other in this kind of wonderful way and creating this wonderful potential future. That's especially exciting and gives hope. I mean, what happened these last few weeks, politics have been particularly volatile as well at the time of this recording. So I think that's just what the world needs. It's also why I got involved in cryptocurrency in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, for me, kind of coming from AI side, it was, I mean, the reason why we started as AI company, right? Near was Near AI originally. And we were effectively built like our own version of Scale AI with a bunch of computer science students around the world. And so we needed to pay them. And it was like really hard because the people don't have bank accounts. There's restrictions on how dollars can be received, etc. Like all the usual stuff that we kind of know in crypto. But like when you start building a startup, it's like very painful. And so we ended up looking at blockchain as like really a solution for just our own problem, and end up like not finding anything that actually like matched our requirements, which was microtransactions at scale that are easy to use, easy to build on. And so that's kind of how we focused on Near protocol. But as it evolved, I mean, the kind of understanding of the self-sovereignty and really like importance of that, I would say, grew. And I think like applying it back to AI, I realized that I think that is actually the mission. The mission is to make sure we don't end up in 1984, because even before the chat LLMs, right? Like the reality is, the Instagram algorithm, the Facebook algorithm, they are driving how you perceive the world, right? There was lots of like, even Facebook did studies themselves, like they could, depending on what they did with algorithm, could affect how people like had relationships and everything. And now as LLMs, it's even worse because that is, how we perceive information. Like I just ask what's the news today, and that is how I get it. If we're running agents, that's how business is done. And so if that's not really kind of on our side, if it's not user owned, we effectively are giving all of our power, not just governance, we're giving all of our power to somebody else. So we can end up in 1984 if we're not careful. And so I think, to me, kind of the blockchain is a new way that enables us to build in a user-owned kind of way technology. Like governance is part of that. The new economic models is part of that, right? Because like, let's imagine I'm like, hi, my mission is to make sure AI is yours, but I'm going to build a centralized for-profit company that will, get all your data. It's like, well, that kind of doesn't work, right? You actually need a different model. And we know like OpenAI actually started as a nonprofit with a mission of, advancing AI for the world.
That was dirty, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think, again, it's really important to, I mean, it's easy to say like, oh, this person is like bad, etc. I actually think the incentives always drive the outcome. An incentive of like, hey, they needed to raise hundreds of, billions of dollars, and then hundred like tens and billions, etc. And like the structure they had were not possible. Now, again, with blockchain, you can actually create economic engine.
Optically, it looked terrible though, going from a non-profit like
that's
that.
Again, I'm not defending specific decisions.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like if you have kind of this structure, like if you're trying to be non-profit but you need to raise a ton of money, like you don't have the ability to do that. So you creating for-profit thing and you're selling equity into that, and like then you start patching things up. But like, we have an opportunity, again, because we have economics and governance, we can actually create a new model that is actually where people are able to have a voice and kind of control over this. And the motivations and incentives are to build for the user and their success, not to not to capture everybody's data and monetize it. So I think like that's a really important, to me, like approach where like the mindset is different, and like it's not going to change because of the incentives, right? It allows, like, the incentives allow us to continue building this way.
Yeah, we need to align the good with the incentives in crypto. That's the only
Exactly.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really at the core, I think, of why crypto works and also why it's so empowering. And these systems are only empowering if they can scale and can be used by the masses as well. That's also where Near is really bringing that innovation and interaction and interconnection, you could say.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is truly a beautiful and wonderful thing, and that's something I love to see as well in these founders like you as well. You know, you got to have that passion, that vision of the future. You know, it gives meaning, you know, to everything we do, and that's something I also love about working in crypto. Even the small things we do, even for all the other people out there, the smallest things we do, just the one little change, the one little comment, the one little influence we might have, our feather on the scales of history. It all makes a difference, you know, and it's all meaningful. And it's one of the things I love about being in crypto, because I know there's a deep good behind supporting permissionless, decentralized, scalable protocols. That's why I've been so outspoken about my view on this as well.
Yeah. No, we appreciate your outspokenness as well.
Yeah, it keeps
and
me
like, yeah, always challenging and always learning. So
Yeah.
that's the idea.
Yeah, no, and then that's been a source for me as well. Like I actually enjoy seeking out points of disagreement, as we've done very civilly as well in this particular conversation. Yeah, the future is bright. The future is near, and the
Future is
future is
near.
now. I think it's a perfect spot to close the discussion, unless you wanted to
No,
expand
I
on.
think this is good.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
appreciate coming back.
thank you so much. No, I appreciate you coming back. My God, and you've been so like wonderful about this. Like I was devastated for a couple of days that like that recording was lost. I was like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. almost completely lost the motivation to do this, but it came back eventually, and I think the energy was great. Like I actually really enjoyed the energy here. So we'll maybe do this thing again sometime, or meet on a Spaces or something like that.
Yeah,
With
no,
a governance
yes.
proposal.
Yeah,
Actually,
Spaces
I'll
sounds
pass
good.
one more really fun idea to you, because I think you're going to enjoy this one. One fun idea. What if I came to Near, okay, and I put out a proposal, right? This is in 10 years from now. I'm going to do this in 10 years from now. I'm going to put out a proposal, and I'm going to say you're going to take 10% of the block reward, right? And we're going to put that towards a UBI system. Okay, we're going to layer an identity system on top, which means you need to like identify yourself on the blockchain. That's the trade-off. We're not going to allow no Sybil attacks here. Like, would you? So that means what we've just created a type of global UBI within a fully like libertarian, or I guess voluntary system, you could say. Like just the thinking behind that is a particularly exciting one for me, because solving some key problems. Like obviously only the poorest people in the world would want to sign up to this system, right? But it has a kind of equalizing effect globally if you give some of that reward, say, back to the world, let's say. And I think the way I could justify the proposal is by saying, hey, look, this is to help create circular economies and to stimulate usage and to create positive press. And you know, maybe 10% of the treasury might justify such a scheme in the far future. I know this is pie in the sky stuff, but it just came to me, and I want to know your.
I mean, the approach we use, because I mean, one of the projects that was built on top of Near was the data labeling project, and so it kind of has different levels of tasks, and there was for a long time running effectively staking rewards from kind of large delegation that were distributed to the people who come in and worked, and so. And the work was like, you know, image labeling, like finding like things that any normal person is able to do. And so this is kind of, I mean, I think we can have a whole separate episode on debating like UBI is the exact right structure, or there needs to be some form of like work put in because otherwise people don't actually value it and they misuse it. So I think there's some interesting questions there. But I mean, we've had some experiments where we even have this testimonials effectively where like during this was including during COVID. Somebody didn't have a job like in Philippines and this was their way to make living, and like somebody like left their factory job because they were able to earn here a reasonable living. So I think there's like interesting experiments that we've already done, and there's more to be done even before you do like a full scale global version of this.
Yeah, I couldn't resist throwing that idea out there. Just the idea of a treasury. You can do all sorts of things. You could like fund a private military. You could create types of welfare systems. You could fund development in a way, or marketing. Dash actually back in the day, they actually funded a call center. So that if you had a problem with your wallet, you just call the call center and it's all done in this kind of decentralized way. I'm like, that's amazing. Like you can't really do that with other designs, so the possibilities are kind of endless. Sorry, I couldn't resist picking your brain on that one. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure having you on. I really enjoyed this conversation, and yeah, keep up the good work, because we need these systems and we need them more now than ever. So now just thank you for your contribution.
Yeah, I appreciate being here, and thanks for your contributions as well.
Thank you. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.